Good morning, good day, and good afternoon to everyone. It's now 9 minutes past the time of the start of the meeting. I'm currently having 183 colleagues who have joined the webinar. We wanted to give it a few minutes because we had colleagues struggling with technology and some colleagues were struggling to connect. So we were trying to give a few minutes to those colleagues who were struggling to connect. Hence, we are a little bit behind with the time, but we will try to catch up as we present. I see we already have few comments. And I see that there's questions about the start of the meeting and people are saying that they cannot hear or see anything. So I want to know if I'm audible at the moment, if everybody can hear me, if everybody can see me or hear me. So I just need one participant to type on the chat to say if they can see me or if they can hear me. Okay, thank you very much. I've received few confirmation that you can see and you can hear me. Thank you very much. I've put on the slides now, on the screen, I have put a slide of the rules of engagement. So I just wanted to explain that because this is a webinar, as participants, you will not be able to turn on your videos or your audio, or you will not even be able to see who else is in attendance. Only the call secretariat is able to do this. But however, like you've already tested, you are more than welcome to type your comments and your questions on the chat as we go along. So what will happen is that we will present, we'll provide different presentations by different people. We will run through all the presentations before we take the question and answers. So as colleagues present, please feel free to type your Q&A, and at the end of the webinar, there will be somebody who helps us with the Q&A that have been raised, and then we will respond to all the questions provided that the time allows. The questions that we can't get through by the time of the end of the webinar, we will then respond to that. We will write responses on those questions, and then we will upload them on the website so that everybody can see the responses to the questions that we can respond to during the course of this webinar because of the time. And please note that the webinar is recorded, and so the video of this webinar, together with the PowerPoint slides that will be used, will be uploaded on the NRF call webpage. I hope that is clear. I'm now going to put the slides on presentation mode so that we can formally start with the webinar. Let's see if it can go on presentation mode. I know it's not on presentation mode right now. There we go. You should now be able to see the slides on presentation mode. I will not for now go through all the questions that have been typed on the Q&A chat. We will take stock of all the questions at the end of the webinar, like I have explained. Okay. Okay. So, okay, I'm trying to move the slides now. It's taking a bit of time. Okay, just to outline quickly the focus of this webinar, we thought it would be a good idea to organize this webinar for all the researchers that will be submitting their full proposals. We have planned for an hour and 30 minutes for this webinar. So therefore, if we run out of time, like I indicated, the Q&A that we will not be able to respond to during the webinar, we will type the responses and upload those on the NRF call webpage. So the webinar is divided into actually 4 main sections. The first session is the one that I will be presenting, and that will just focus on the initiative itself and the full proposal phase. And then the second session will be presented by another colleague, and it will focus on the review process. That will be a 25 minutes presentation. And then we'll have the last formal presentation by another colleague that will focus on the online application system, the NRF Connect, that you will be using to submit your full proposals. So with that session, the idea is that the colleague will display the online submission system and go through it together with the researchers just to explain how you submit your full proposal. And then at the end, like I said, then we will take stock of the questions and we will provide the responses as the 3 presenters. And then we'll have 5 minutes at the end just to close the webinar and to outline the way forward. Now, this webinar is organized by the core secretariat, and it is the core secretariat that will be doing the presentations to you. And as you are now aware, the core secretariat is based at the NRF South Africa, National Research Foundation South Africa. So the colleagues that will be presenting, including myself, we are based at the National Research Foundation of South Africa. My name is Prudence Makura, and I'm currently the director responsible for international collaborative research grants of the NRF. And this pilot call falls under my area of responsibility. So I will be taking you through the background of the pilot call and the process for the submission of the full proposal. And then immediately after, I will hand over to my colleague from the NRF South Africa as well, who will present on the review process. And then she will also hand over to another colleague who will present on the online system. Just to kickstart the conversation. So I'm sure you've seen that this is a pilot call of the Global Research Council. And I just want to explain a little bit on what the Global Research Council is and why they've decided to do this pilot call. So at the Global Research Council is actually a virtual organization comprising of the heads of funding agencies globally. So this is a platform. This is a virtual platform that brings together all the science granting councils worldwide. They come together to share information, to share best practices for collaborative issues and so forth. I've also tried to detail the aims of the Global Research Council. So their overall aims are to improve communication and cooperation among the funding councils or the funding agencies globally, is to promote the sharing of data and best practices for high quality research and cooperation, is to provide a forum for regular meetings for the heads of the granting councils, and to respond to opportunities and address issues of common concern in support of research and education, to serve as a resource for institutions wishing to build a world-class research landscape, and to explore mechanisms that support the global science enterprise. So at one of their meetings, the heads of the granting councils decided to have this global pilot call under the Global Research Council. So if you look at the pilot call, it's actually aimed at addressing aim number 4 that is listed on the slide, to respond to opportunities and address issues of common concern in the support of research and education. And we will all agree that having a call focusing on the SDGs is actually an opportune endeavor, and addresses, because the SDGs addresses challenges and problems that are common, to all the countries. That's part of the reason why the Global Research Council decided to go for this. So this is a pilot, colleagues. The Global Research Council as a platform have never had a call like this before. So we are piloting to see if there is value and in having such a collaboration within the Global Research Council going forward. So when this idea was raised, there were a few granting councils that actually volunteered to be part of the pilot. And we have 11 granting councils that actually volunteered to be part of this pilot. Of the 11, we have 5 granting councils or funding agencies in the Global North that agreed to join the pilot. We have TÜBİTAK from Turkey. We have Formas based in Sweden. We have SNSF of Switzerland, NWO of the Netherlands. We have RCN in Norway. And we have 6 funding agencies from the Global South that have also volunteered to form part of this pilot call. That includes ANIT, that is based in Chile. We have FOST, that is based in Cote d'Ivoire. Obviously, the National Research Foundation of South Africa. And then we have the National Research Fund based in Kenya. And then we have COSTECH of Tanzania. These are the 11 funders that have agreed to be part of the pilot call. And these are the funders that are actually putting in funds in supporting the collaborative research that will come out of this pilot call. Now, it was also agreed after this, after having this granting council volunteering to be part of the pilot, it was agreed that the National Research Foundation of South Africa serve as a call secretariat for the pilot phase. Hence, you have this webinar currently being conducted by the National Research Foundation. So, colleagues, the objectives of the pilot call or the aim of the pilot call is actually to advance the implementation of the 2030 Agenda on Sustainable Development. Now, when this call was conceptualized, it was agreed that emphasis should actually be put on the listed 6 challenges, the 6 challenges that I've listed there on the screen: human well-being and capabilities, sustainable and just economies, food systems and nutrition patterns, energy decarbonization with universal access, urban and peri-urban development, and global environmental commons. So these are the challenges that were identified for the pilot call. And I'm sure you're already familiar with this because you're already now in the full proposal phase. Now, it is very important, colleagues, to note that each participating funder, the 11 funders that I've indicated, each funder can specify some of the 6 challenges that are a priority to them. So some of the funders maybe will prioritize 4 of the 6 or 5 of the 6 or so forth. That is why it is very important for all the researchers to please always refer to the national annexes of each of these funders, because it's through these national annexes that you will see which funder covers which challenge. So if I were to give an example, the National Research Foundation of South Africa as an example, we would support all the 6 challenges. So, and all the 6 challenges are priority for the National Research Foundation of South Africa. And the South African researchers who will be applying, can go into the NRF call webpage and look at the national annex. And this national annex outlines the priorities for each funding agency that is involved in this pilot call. So it is very important that as you go through your application, as you put together your proposals, that you download the national annexes of each funder. If you look at the call document, that was uploaded on the NRF webpage. You will see, I think it's at the end of the core document, the last page, just before the annex, the last page of the core document, you will see the list of all the funders. You will see also their contact details. We've also indicated on that table, we've also indicated a link to the national annex of each of these funders. So the onus are on the researchers to actually go to those links and download the national annex of their respective funding agencies. And as one of the generic criteria of this call, we've made it very clear that each of the proposals should cover not more than 2 of the challenges that I mentioned there on the screen. So please pay attention to that when you put together your full proposals. I just wanted to also quickly run through the application procedure, the call application procedure. I think you are aware, colleagues, that we are implementing a 2-step application process. We started with the first step, which was the concept note step. With this step, we actually requested interested consortia to submit concept notes. And the call for the concept note was actually opened last year in May, and it closed around August last year. And after receiving the concept notes that we received, there are about 205 concept notes that were received with the when we launched the call for the concept notes. And what happened is that as soon as the call for concept notes closed, we went through what we call the eligibility check. Now, this process took longer than anybody had anticipated because we were quite surprised to have received so many concept notes. We actually, because this is a pilot call, we actually did not anticipate receiving so much interest and so many concept notes from our research communities. So 205 concept notes were received. I've indicated how many concept notes were received per country on the slides there. And the eligibility was done in 2 phases. So we had to allow each of the participating funding agencies to actually do their national eligibility check first. So each of the 11 funding agencies looked at their national eligibility, and they used, obviously, the national annex that they published to actually check if the researchers that are applying to them for funding are actually eligible to receive funding from them. So each funder went through this process. And once this process was concluded, then it was an opportunity for the call secretariat to go through the generic eligibility check of the call. So what that means is that the call secretariat looked at all the eligible concept notes by the funders. And we checked if all the concept notes that have been ticked eligible by the funders actually meet the general eligibility of the call. So these are some of the criteria that I've listed there on the screen, some of the criteria that the call secretariat looked at to check the eligibility, the general eligibility of all the concept notes that were submitted. So after the checks by the call secretariat, this is the scenario and or the outcome of the general eligibility check. So we end up with 114 concept notes that were found to be eligible to submit a full proposal. So what we are having here today, colleagues, is the researchers that have been approved to submit a full proposal. So we are actually expecting to receive 114 full proposals with the second phase. Of course, researchers can decide that they are no longer interested in continuing to submit a full proposal, which is absolutely okay. It is just that we would really appreciate it if researchers who will no longer be able to submit their full proposal, please let the core secretariat know that you will not be submitting the full proposal, so that we do not waste time with making follow-ups, with those researchers who are no longer interested in submitting the full proposal. But as things stand right now, we are expecting to receive 114 full proposals. And I've also indicated how many proposals we are expecting per funder on the screen there. So now that this process have ended of the eligibility check for concept note, we have now opened the call for full proposals. This call opened during the first week of March. And this is why we are now having this webinar, because now we are moving into the second step of this pilot call. So I just want to quickly, I'm sure you are now familiar with this general eligibility for the consortium, but I just want to run through them quickly just to remind colleagues. It is mandatory that the submitting consortia are transdisciplinary. This has always been made clear. It was also made clear during the application for concept notes. The consortia should consist of at least 3 to 6 applicants from at least 3 different countries that are funding this call. And then consortia should consist of institutions from both Global North and the Global South. And it is very important, colleagues, that each consortium appoints what we call the consortium lead. This is very important, colleagues, because the consortium lead is a person that will take the overall responsibility of the project. This is the person that will communicate with the call secretariat. This is the person that will be responsible for the management of the project as a whole. But it is also important to understand that within one project, you should also have core principal investigators or core leads per country, because each of the funders that are involved will need to have a principal investigator to deal with the granting and the report and the national reporting for each project. So as much as we have the consortium lead, we also need the national leads, or what we call the core PIs. And also, colleagues, remember that all partners in the consortia requesting funding should be eligible to receive funding from their respective funding agencies. And this is why I keep on emphasizing the importance of reading the national annexes, because you will only know whether or not you are eligible if you look at your national annex. And also, it has been emphasized on the core document that the consortia should be both gender diverse and should also consist of established and emerging researchers. And also, I just wanted to touch a little bit on the eligibility of the projects themselves, not just the consortium. So you will realize that the duration of the project vary. So there are those projects that will be 2-year projects. There are those that will be 4-year projects. So the project can actually run from 2 to 4 years. Please check the national annex and make it very clear that, and also if you don't understand, you can also contact your national contact point, and the contact details have been listed on the core document, so that you are very clear that your proposal will be either a duration of 2 years, 4 years, or 3 years. This is dependent on your funder. So please check your national annex and contact the national contact point to clarify this with your national contact point. And also it's important that you understand that the proposal that you are submitting should actually be based on a currently ongoing project or a recently completed project. So it shouldn't be a completely new project. It should be a continuation of a project that was previously funded. So please make this, please take note of this, because this is very important. It's one of the eligibility criteria. We check that all the 104 applications that are currently being accepted into full proposal actually have an existing project that, that they are using for this application. So please, this is very important. You must pay attention to this. And also it's important to note that we are actually requiring projects that are seeking innovative approaches to promoting or facilitating the achievement of the SDGs, projects that are actually likely to have societal impact, or projects that are likely to address the challenges of vulnerable groups, for example, and projects that will actually advance the SDGs either locally or regionally. So this is very important, colleagues. If you can please take note of this eligibility criteria when you put together your full proposal. You will also see when my colleague present on the review process how critical this eligibility criteria are. Okay, so just to touch a little bit on the budget, this is also highlighted on your core document. Currently, we have 8.2 million euro for the projects that will be approved out of this pilot call. It is very difficult to say at this stage exactly how many projects, will be funded, because this is dependent on many different factors. And this will be negotiated at the end after the review process. But currently the envelope of the fundings stands at 8.2 million. I know this might change slightly with some of the funders being able maybe to source more funding and putting in more funding to fund more projects than they had anticipated. But for now, we are working on 8.2 million. Please look at your national annex again to see what the budgetary limitations are in line with your respective funding agencies, because there are different rules for different funding agencies. And also it's important to note that you are allowed to include partners that are not eligible for funding from any of the participating funding agencies, but they should secure their own funding. And this is important because one of the things that you will need to submit is a signed letter of intent by those partners that are not requesting funding from the participating funding agencies. So it's important to take note of that. Okay. And just wanted to, as my last slide, I just wanted to quickly also highlight this document that you will need to attach when you submit your full proposal. It's important that we receive the CVs of all the partners in a consortium. The CV must be a maximum of 3 pages, colleagues. This is very important. And there is no template that has been designed for this CV. So you are allowed to put your CV together whichever way you want, and to emphasize those things that you think are important to emphasize, aligning to this call, to this pilot call. So there is no template for the CVs, but it must not exceed 3 pages. You will also be required to attach a detailed budget breakdown for each of the partners that are involved in the consortium. You will see that on the online application system, you are requested to indicate the budget, but the budget there is really a summary of the budget of the consortium. But you will be required to attach a detailed budget breakdown for each of the partners. There is no template that we have designed for this because different funders support different activities. So you look at the national annex, look at what your respective funding agencies are covering, and put together the budget, a detailed budget, based on the national annex. And please also contact your national contact points to make sure that what you are submitting is in line with what they require for this pilot call. And as I've explained, you will also be required to provide the letters of intent, signed letters of intent by the other research partners who are not requesting funding from the participating funding agencies. And very importantly, you are also required to submit the latest report of your ongoing project, or the project that has just the completed project that you are basing your application on. We require a report of that project. So this is just me trying to run through some of the most important things that I think you should put at the back of your head when you put together your proposals. As I've explained, we'll run through all the presentation before we deal with the questions on the chat room. So I would like to now invite my colleague to actually give a presentation on the review process. I'm not going to go through the timeline because those have already been shared with you on your core document, but just to say that we are expecting to complete all the processes by the end of November, because we would like the project to start as early as the beginning of December. Obviously, these are tentative timelines, but these are the timelines that funders are working on right now. Nosisa, I would like to give you this opportunity now to make your presentation on the reviews and the evaluation. I'm gonna stop sharing so that I can see because when I'm sharing the slides, it's difficult for me to see who is in the room and who is not in the room. So I'm gonna stop sharing so that I can see if my colleague is here and is ready to provide the presentation. Okay, if you can just give me a moment, colleagues, so that I can sort out the technology issues for my colleague who's supposed to present on the review processes. Just if I can just have a minute, and I will be with.
Hello. Can people hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. I wonder if Prudence, you can continue.
Is that you speaking, Nosisa? I can, hardly hear you. I hear background sound, but I can't. You are not very audible. Is it you speaking right now?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me now?
I think it's your volume, maybe.
It's up.
Okay, yeah. Now I hear you clearly. Do you want to share the slides from your side, or do you want me to control the slides for you?
I think you should continue because
Okay.
I am not seeing the option to share from my side.
No problem. I'll just share that now. Just give me a moment. It is coming. Let me know if you can see it.
Definitely. Okay, next slide, please. Oh, stay on that slide.
Okay.
Colleagues, good afternoon. My name is Nosisa Dube, as indicated by Prudence. I'm the Director for Reviews and Evaluations, and this is the directorate within the NRF that is the custodian for all peer-based reviews and evaluations. So this is our specialty. My portfolio focuses on the peer review of international research grants. So this is why I am presenting to you today. Prudence, next slide. So these are the different steps that will be followed during the review process. Prudence has already indicated, and all of you know that we've already passed step 1. Now we are at the point of the submission of the full proposals that are being put together by the different applicants. So we're going to have a 2-stage process, as Prudence again indicated earlier, and we'll have a remote review process and then a panel assessment meeting. So if we look at step 2, the full proposals will be assessed remotely, and we will try to put together transdisciplinary panels, meaning that we'll have scientific peers, and then for the purposes of the presentation, we can call the other peers non-scientific peers, because they'll be from the community, from beyond academia. And then in terms of the recruitment of the reviewers, each funder will participate in the recruitment and the selection of reviewers for applications. And then the remote reviews by external reviewers, each application will be reviewed by 3 scientific experts, and then we'll add other relevant stakeholders as per need. So with, the conventional calls where the focus of the review was the scientific merit of the proposal, and the impact was not so much in conversations as it is today. We normally would use 3 experts and then a moderator. We are going to include that, and then we'll also add the relevant stakeholders. And this process will be done together with all the participants, and we will nominate these reviewers and then do some discipline matching, matching the reviewer expertise as well as with the proposals that have been submitted. And I will share a bit on how we do that. This discipline matching, we don't just look at the CVs of the reviewers and look at the keywords or what is proposed in the applications, but what we do, we get the list of the proposals that are submitted, and then the nominated reviewers, and then we subject this list to this group that has been pre-appointed, and then they can indicate themselves what proposals they will be comfortable reviewers that match with their expertise. The other approach where we used to do it ourselves and match the applications with the reviewers, we used to get a lot of pushback where people will tell us that not in field, and they don't know why they are selected to review this proposal. So then we take a different approach by subjecting the descriptions of the projects as well as the titles, and then they can read and then identify for themselves the applications they're comfortable reviewing. And then our role check the conflict of interest and all the other matters that need to be considered when it comes to the conflict of interest. And then all reviewers will have access to a full proposal. And the reason why it's important to mention this is that we are reviewing both intellectual and the broader impact, the intellectual merit and the broader impact. So the intention then is to allow the scientific peers to assess the intellectual merits, and they may comment on aspects of the broader impact they have knowledge of, but the non-academic reviewers will then assess the broader impacts and strengthen this other part of the review. And then all of them will submit the reviewer reports, the qualitative comments only, and no quantitative scores. They are submitted to members of this external peer review group that are called moderators. They sort of play a role of chairpersons, but they follow up together with the NRF Secretariat for submission of reviewer reports. They also check the quality of what is being submitted. And then if the reports that are being submitted are not of good quality, then we sort of look for more reviewers, or we go back to the reviewer to then request that they do a better job. If that reviewer resists, then we move on to reallocate it to another. Then the reports then get moderated throughout the review process. So we don't just wait for the end of this external peer review process. We check them as they are being submitted and monitor them. And this, the content of the review reports is consolidated onto a spreadsheet. For example, if we have one application and it has 3 reviewers, the comments of each of the review reports per application will be captured in this report so that it is available. And then summaries are made by the moderators for the next phase. So all the original reports will be given to the panel members, and then the moderators will summarize the outcomes. Then the panel assessment process, there will be then a meeting in the second phase where the purpose will be to identify and recommend fundable applications. And then the panel will be virtual for obvious reasons that this is an international endeavor. And now the tricky part here is that we're still working out, but who will be the panel members, because we can't select everyone who was part of the external review. There will be new members that are included in this panel that are identified in discussion with all the funders. We could also have some of the moderators that were present as the overseers of the initial process. And then the panelists, as I've indicated, all funders will have a say, and then their role will be to assess the quality of the reviewer reports, and they will largely rely on this content. So the panelists will be generalists that have broad knowledge and adequate knowledge on the proposals, but the initial participants, the external reviewers, will be the experts that inform these assessments of the second stage. The panelists are also expected to go through the applications, and they should use the assessment criteria that is provided so that they can then, this will enable them to be able to tell the objectivity of the reviewer reports and whether they are of a good quality. And then they're expected to comment, and the additional part they play, they will provide quantitative scores, which then get discussed and averaged to form overall scores. The last part will be the ranking of applications based on all merits, both the intellectual and the broader impacts, as well as the quantitative scores that are provided. Funding decisions will be taken here in this panel. Next slide, Prudence. Next slide.
Yes, I'll go to the next slide. Thanks, Nosisa. I just want to address a burning issue before I go there. I'm receiving a lot of queries regarding whether or not the participant will be able to ask questions. So when we started the webinar, I made it very clear that you can and you are more than welcome to type all your questions or your comments on the Q&A there, and then we will take stock of all the questions, and at the end of the webinar we will address those questions, and those that we can address because of the time limitation, we will type them out. We will type the responses to all the questions that are raised in this webinar, and we will upload that as a Q&A document. We will upload that on the NRF call webpage. So those colleagues that are raising their hands, we will not be able to have your audio turned on and for you to actually raise your question, but we will take your questions at the end. Those that we can't respond, we will type out responses and we will upload a Q&A document on the NRF webpage. Thank you. Sorry, Nosis, I just wanted to address that quickly.
Okay. So the guiding principles for this review, they are based on the GRC Responsible Research Assessment principles and other core review principles also endorsed by the GRC earlier on. So if you consider what the call addresses, the processes and criteria are defined in advance. So the criteria will be in the next slide, but we are doing that as I speak, explaining the process that will be followed. And the call promotes equality, diversity, and inclusion. For example, panel members with experience in research that benefits the vulnerable groups, research that also benefits society, and pathways to impact will be appointed, and the call requires this, and the proposals are transdisciplinary. They promote co-creation. And then impartiality, we will try to have this quantitative assessment that is supported by qualitative expert comments. And then the appropriateness of the review type. The assessment considers the inclusion of all parties involved and all funders, for example, were involved in developing the guidelines. They will be involved in recruiting reviewers to make sure that there is no bias and there is balance even in the processes. The panel discussions, they will be involved, and then in the funding decisions. And to manage reviewer fatigue, considering the review burden, no reviewer will handle more than 10 applications. Ideally, it should be the maximum of 5. And then the assessment premise, we have assessment criteria that is explicit, and then we'll consider confidentiality and data protection. It is addressed through the review guidelines that will be provided to the reviewers. And the committees, we will attempt to have balanced committees with relevant experts across all disciplines and also beyond the academia. Criteria is in line with research missions. For example, we're trying to address the SDGs. The processes recognize a wide variety of research outputs and activities. Remember, Prudence talked about CVs that need to be written out. So it's important that although there is no template that is given for these CVs, because we are still discussing the issue of narrative CVs. So just give good information that will then define your role as a researcher and your contribution to research. And other core principles we consider is excellence, meaning that we address this through good discipline matching, and also that the compliance to guidelines and the eligibility criteria that only eligible applications will come through. Conflict of interest will be addressed. And then the issue of bias, we try to get moderators in. Integrity, we say what we do and we do what we say we do. That is one of the things that we try to observe. And then the ethics, the issues of plagiarism will also be considered during the review process. Next slide. Next slide, Prudy. So this is the assessment criteria. It is categorized into three key categories: the relevance and potential impact. Projects should build on relevant knowledge, addressing challenges innovatively, contribute to the SDGs, lead to societal impact, and employ transdisciplinary approaches. And secondly, the implementation stage methods should be realistic and innovative, and they should be aligned with what needs to be achieved. And then the timeframes, budget should also be realistic. The work package, milestones, the roles and responsibilities. People usually take it for granted. They don't define the roles and responsibilities of the participants well. So it's very important. And then the ethical issues, I've just touched on the plagiarism issue, and then the gender diversity and other diversity perspectives where relevant should be addressed. And the public engagement with relevant stakeholders, the projects should include that aspect throughout the project period. And in one of the panel meetings I once attended, reviewers did not consider running a 2-day workshop with the community as a public engagement. This is part of it, but it's not, the issue of co-creation and also inclusion of the users of the end users of the research outcomes in the design of the research is important. And then the third part, competence and collaboration. The PI and the research group should have the skills and competencies to carry out and the project and achieve its objectives. The equitable partnerships, it's not equal, but equitable, that there should be balance in the sharing of roles and the co-designing, which is something that I've just mentioned. And the plans to strengthen knowledge generation, I suppose human capacity development across the emerging and established researchers. And then the project group and the distribution of influence. We should not have one group dominating another. There should be balance in terms of influence and agenda. So the next slide, Prudy. Next slide, Prudence. And these are the ratings, rating scores, that this is how the scores will be allocated. They are self-explanatory. The proposal, if the proposal is missing information, the reviewers will not have anything to assess. So sometimes researchers that are well known in their fields do make an assumption that, you write your proposal assuming that you are known in your space for doing well, but reviewers will actually work with what is written in the proposal. I'm sure people have experience in this, so you give as much information and be as clear as possible. Otherwise, you get comments from reviewers that there is no enough information to make an assessment on this aspect. And then you can see that these ratings they get better as you go up. And the excellent proposal will be a proposal that addresses all the relevant aspects of the criteria, and any shortcomings will be minor shortcomings. I think that'll be all from my side.
Thank you very much, Nosisa. And looking at the time, I'm going to quickly ask my colleague Nkateko to quickly introduce herself and give us a presentation on the online submission system. I will stop sharing because I know that Nkateko will like to control her own slides. Are you here, Nkateko? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
She's here. Okay.
Hello, Prudence. Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, yeah, you are also audible from our side. You can please go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much, and a good day, colleagues. My job for today is the easy one because I get to take you through the NRF Connect system. The first thing that I'm going to cover is how you create an ORCID profile, because in order for you to log into the system, you need to have an ORC ID. I'm going to click on login or register with. This will then redirect me to an ORCID website. If I have an ORC ID, I will enter the ORC ID there and the password. But if I've never registered on NRF Connect, I need to click on register now in order for me to create an ORC ID. If I click register now, it then asks for my first name. Last name is not optional. It's not a compulsory field, primary email, and confirm email. I'm going to complete all these fields so I can show you how it looks like. Okay, last name is not compulsory. Email address, this same email address that I'm going to capture here has to be the same email that I'll use when I now log into NRF Connect. Like I said, you can log in with your ORC ID. If you don't remember the ORC ID because it's a very long number, you can use the email address, but it has to be the email address captured on this page. Okay, I'm just going to make this 1, and then we go 3. Yeah, maybe let me just make it exactly the same. Right, additional email address, that's not a compulsory field, so I will click on next. Then it will bring up a couple of names asking, is this you? And I've never registered or I don't have an ORC ID. I'm going to say none of these are me, continue with registration. Then it asks for a password. The same password that I'm going to capture here is the password that I will need in order to log into NRF Connect. So I will capture a password. I need to confirm my password. Then if I want ORCID to send me new features or tips, then I'm going to tick on that block. If not, I'm just going to click next to continue with the registration. When it comes to this page, kindly select everyone or trusted organization. Because if you say only me, then it means you're not giving NRF the go ahead to now pull your data from ORCID. I'm going to select trusted organization because NRF falls within that. And I'm going to give consent and tick that I'm not a robot. We'll then click register to proceed with the registration process. And then when it comes to this page, it also again says, do you give NRF access or the right to pull your information? And we're going to authorize. Please do not click deny access, because that will mean then you won't be able to log into the system. We'll click authorize access, then you will see the system will then redirect back to NRF Connect system, where I will click continue with registration. It has pulled my first name. It has now pulled the surname, but now it wants the surname as a compulsory field, of which I'm going to capture the date of birth. I'm going to capture and the email address. As I mentioned, this is the email address that I captured when I was doing the ORC registration. Mobile number, you can capture the mobile number or you can leave it. It's not a compulsory field. And then I'll click register, which will then complete the registration process. Now, the system automatically logs me in. And for me to now then create an application for the SDGs core, I need to either scroll down. I'll find it here under the list of applications. All you see here is all the funding opportunities that are currently open on the NRF Connect system. But our interest is only for this call, so I'm going to click on apply. There are two ways for me to access the list of available funding opportunities or calls. I can either apply from the landing page, or I can click my applications. I can then navigate to the category, which in this case, the category is research grants. And then I can look for or search for the call and click create. Then there's this pop-up that says, are you sure you want to create? And it gives you the call name, and I'll click create to proceed. Then all the sections are listed. It gives you the category name, the funding opportunity name, and a reference number, which is a unique number to the person that is currently creating or that is currently applying for the call. And it also tells me when the call will close on the system. The first section that I need to complete is personal details, and I just click on edit. Then it will open with the different fields. And as you can see next to the fields, we have a small asterisk that shows you which fields are compulsory and which are not compulsory. Example, first name is a compulsory field, but the gender is not compulsory. Okay, I'm going to complete all these fields. Title is a lookup field. I'm going to select my title. Gender, I will leave it, or I can select female, male. And we have, if nothing is selected there, you can then maybe select a different gender. I select the country. Let me just do this. I actually want to not select, so I can show the colleagues how it will work. If we can leave that as is. And country, it's a searchable field, so I can actually type in what I'm looking for. Primary organization, also a lookup field, and if there's more options that we need to add here, it's possible for us to add more options. Email address, also a lookup field, and then I can select from the list. Also here, I can search and select from the list, and then the highest qualification. Once I'm done with all my fields, I will then click save. Then the page will redirect back to the list of sections, and personal details is now marked complete. Okay, now I'm going to click on basic information, where I will then select my institution. What we've seen happen is some of the institutions are not on this list. Please, if you search and you find that your institution is not listed here, just send the colleagues an email, Nombuso an email, and we will add the institution. Okay, and I'm going to put the title. And the years we have from 1 to 4. If I select that the funding period or funding years is 2 years, then auto calculate the years for me, and it populates the project and date. 3 years, it does the same thing. And I'll click on save. Okay, and then the next section is details of application, which has instructions. You can go through the instructions, read through the instructions, and you can now click to create or to capture the details of application record. Okay, and you can select from the drop-down list. Same with this field, you can type in to select. Okay. So colleagues, I won't go through each and every section to capture, but basically that's how it works. I've taken you through how to create a new ORCID profile and how you then navigate to find the specific call in order for you to apply. I'm going to just edit each one of them. This is a section with subsections, so you need to edit to expand and edit to capture. And we have human capacity development. It's a grid section so that you can be able to add more than one. You will click create, you will capture the information, and if you go back to click create again, it will then add all the records on the system. I'm going to pause and maybe take questions if there are any.
Thank you, Nkateko. Are you ending your presentation there? Hello, Nkateko, can you hear me? I just want to know if you are ending your presentation here.
Prudence, if there are no questions, then maybe I will end it here by just maybe the last thing that I'll mention is all the sections as are listed here are compulsory. So before I complete all the sections, I won't be able to submit the application, meaning that all the sections have to be captured and complete sections will be indicated with a tick. Only then would I be able to submit the application.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so as I have explained, you can stop sharing, Nkateko, that's fine. As I have explained, colleagues, that we wanted to run through all the three presentations and deal with questions after the webinar. Now we are at the time of the Q&A, and we will take the questions that have been raised on the Q&A part, and then if it happens that we run out of time, because I see that now we have only 10 minutes left to deal with the questions. If it happens that we run out of time, it will not be a crisis. You can just keep on typing your questions. We will take all the questions and we will make sure that we provide written responses to all the questions that have been raised here. And we will upload a Q&A document on the NRF webpage with all the responses of the questions that were raised during this webinar. So please do not feel anxious if we are not getting to your question. We will eventually get to all the questions through written responses at a later stage. But I will now like to go through the Q&A and see how many questions have been raised there, and if we can start dealing with those questions. I'll ask my colleagues that presented here, Nosisa and Ngateko, to also deal with the questions that are directed specifically to their sections of the presentation. So can I start with the bottom? Should I take it bottom up, because it's difficult for me to start at the top? Let me see. Okay, if I start right at the bottom to go up the list of the questions. The first question there is, okay, I think this question is based on a previous question. Let me see. Should all the applicants, 3 to 6 of them, fill in existing or create the ORCID, or the PI only is sufficient? Or is it only the consortium lead? So yes, only the consortium lead is expected to complete the ORCID and the NRF, and the application on the NRF Connect. The way in which it works, colleagues, is that we are expecting one, as a core secretariat, we are expecting one application or one proposal per consortium. So we are expecting the consortium lead to be the one who accesses the NRF Connect, create an account, and submit a full proposal. However, if you read the annexes of each funding agency, some of the funding agencies actually require their national PIs to submit national applications to them. Now, the way in which this works is that each funding agency have their own rules of how you submit nationally. You know, some have their own online systems that researchers are expected to use. So in some instances, it will not be a simple case of just cut and paste, taking the application that was submitted on the NRF Connect and then just pasting it and maybe submitting it to your national funder, because it is dependent on what the requirements of your national funder, of your national funders are. So you will find that the national funder, some of the national funders use their own online systems, and though that online system has got its own requirements nationally, you know, so therefore for consortium leads, it means that there's a possibility that a consortium lead will submit twice, because then a consortium lead will have to submit on behalf of the consortia to the NRF, to the core secretariat, and they will also submit for their own national funding agency. So that's the scenario that we are looking at. And hence I was saying that it's very important to ensure that you also have core PIs, core national PIs, that will also be dealing with their national submissions to their respective funding agencies. And then I hope that answers the question, but we can, some of this we can also repeat the responses when we put together the written responses. So Okay, where was I? So research, it's just that some new questions keeps on coming in and mess up with the list. Can you provide an email address for updating institution area under the basic information section? So yes, please, for all the researchers, the email address, the SDG pilot call@NRF is the email address that you use to communicate everything to the core secretariat. So if you wanna ask a question of clarity, or if you are struggling with the system, let's say you are trying to open the system and you are receiving an error or whatever the case may be, that's the email address that you will use to communicate with the core secretariat. And then, but if you need information in terms of your national funding agency, then you need to contact the national contact point as indicated on the core document. And we've provided the telephone numbers and the email addresses of all the national contact points. So only you can submit the questions to the core secretariat, to the NRF, using the SDG pilot call email address, and then we'll deal with those generic questions and submit national questions to your national contact point. The number of proposals submitted based on the PIs that submitted. I'm not sure if I understand this question, but we are only, as the core secretariat, we are expecting one proposal. We are expecting only one proposal from the consortium. One proposal from the consortium that is submitted by the consortium lead. But if you look at the national annexes, there are requirements per funder. So each PI must look at their respective national annex and see what the requirements are from their respective funding agencies and deal with that nationally. I hope I've responded to that question. Where will the partners of the different countries be listed, or do partners each submit their own? I assume it's only the lead PI that populate. I think I've already answered this question. Okay, the new questions come in. Must South African researchers complete their CVs on the NRF system or just attach a Word document? So, like I've indicated, for South Africans, it depends. If a South African researcher is also a consortium lead, then the South African researcher will complete the application to the core secretariat on behalf of the consortium. Then they will have to apply to the NRF as a funding agency and use the NRF Connect as a funding agency. We, as the NRF, we will also send an email to all the NRF PIs, just the South African PIs, and clarify how they should apply. I think that will make it easier for the South African PIs. But the bottom line is that if you are serving as a consortium lead, there might be a requirement for you to submit twice, irrespective of where you are, because it's also dependent on the requirements of your national funder. But what the one thing that is critical is that as a consortium lead, you have the responsibility of submitting a full proposal to the core secretariat through the system that Nkateko has just showcased as a consortium lead, irrespective of which country you are based in. So this is the proposal that will be used for reviews. This is the proposal that will be submitted to reviewers. This is the proposal that will serve as the main proposal for this. The proposals that you guys will be submitting to your national funding agencies is also to meet the requirements of your national funder, so that your national funder can be able to do the necessary internally to do the granting process. That's the main difference. I hope I've captured that clearly. I am a bit confused about the total eligible concept note, which is 114, and is not the sum of the column above. Is the number of the column also including the core applicants? Okay, I'm not sure I understand the question. So each consortium was submitting one application, okay, or one concept note. So I indicated that we received 205 concept notes. So it's 205 concept notes from 205 consortia. So we have 205 consortia that submitted a concept note to the call secretariat. Eligibility check was done for all the 205. And from the 205, 114 concept notes were found to be eligible to move into the second step of full proposal. So we have 114 consortia that is allowed to submit a full proposal. So a consortia means that the consortia is a group or a team of researchers composed of researchers from the different countries. So within a consortia, then you'll have researchers from different countries partnering together. So we have 114 concept notes that have been approved. I hope this has been properly addressed. The information on the NRF Connect must correspond to the consortium leader, right? Okay, so hence I said that what you see on the NRF Connect is what all funders have agreed that is required from each of the consortium that is applying. So you look at your national annex, and then you look at what the requirements are from your national funder. So you might realize that your national funder is actually maybe requesting more than what your consortium lead has actually submitted on the NRF Connect. So let's say you are in a team and the consortium leader in that team is a researcher from South Africa, and maybe you are based in China, as an example. So you will assist your consortium lead to do the generic application to the call secretariat, and the consortium lead, which is the South African researcher in your team, will then submit to the call secretariat. But you, as a PI, as a core PI in China, then you have to look at the NSFC National Annex to see what the NSFC as your national funder require from you as a Chinese researcher. Then you will have to do the necessary, and sometimes you realize that the national funder requires more than what the secretariat has requested. So it is not, in some cases, it is not a simple situation of just taking what was submitted to the core secretariat and just forwarding that to a national fund. In some situations, that's the case, but in some situations, that's not the case. So it is very important that each researcher reads their national annex. And please contact your national contact point if you do not understand what the requirements are from your national funder. Okay, what candidates do we fill in under the human capacity development section of the proposal? So human capacity development is about your emerging researchers. So it's about the training of postgraduate students. So that's the type of information that you complete underneath that section. There are also questions on the YouTube link. Okay, we will take all the questions and we will make sure that we respond to that. To what extent can we deviate from the project description submitted in the concept node? So the idea is that you've already submitted the concept node, which has been found to be eligible, and a lot of things were checked on the concept node to make sure that you are eligible. With the full proposal, you will see that what we are requesting on the full proposal is actually the expansion of your concept node. We need further information for the reviewers, for the expert reviewers, to actually be able to review your proposal, you know? So, for example, you cannot completely change your project from what you submitted on the concept node. because the concept note, the project that you highlighted on the concept note, or how you put together on the concept note, is what was found to be eligible to move into the full proposal phase. All we are requesting you to do in the full proposal phase is to actually expand your proposal so that we can do the review process and see exactly what you are planning to achieve with your project. Can I take 2 more questions? I see the time is not on our side. Can I take 2 more questions? And then the rest, we've taken note of all of these questions, colleagues, and we will make sure that we provide written responses to all of them. One question, can we change the country partners in the final proposal if one country partner wants to leave? Now, this is a very tricky, sorry, can somebody please mute? There's somebody speaking in the background. If you can please mute. So this is a very tricky one, because one of the things that was assessed for eligibility was the actual researchers that are involved in the project. So, for example, there are those probably researchers, depending on the national annexes, there are those researchers maybe that are not eligible to receive funding from a particular funder. So it's difficult to now at this stage change the PIs. I'm talking about the national PIs and the consortium leader, because we make sure that each national PI or consortium leader is actually eligible to receive funding from their national funder. Each funding agency went through all the proposals that involve their researchers and made sure that all of them are actually eligible, to receive funding from their funding agency. That's why that step was important, to ensure that the people who are moving to the second phase are actually the individuals that are actually eligible to receive, or institutions that are eligible to receive funding from their respective funding agencies. Let me try to take one maybe final question. I'm just scrolling through all of them. Most of them will just provide written responses. I think some of these have already touched on. Is it necessary to use the same names of the ORCID, NRF Connect, and the application page, personal details, e.g. using 2 names in one platform and 3 in the other? Okay, I don't understand what the logic of that would be. As Nkateko, I will ask maybe Nkateko to respond to this, but as Nkateko indicated, the details that we are using and the email addresses that you are using on the ORCID will be the same that you need to use when you access the NRF Connect, right, Nkateko?
Yes, Prudence, you are correct.
So they must use the names that they are using on the ORCID should be the same names that they will be using under the NRF Connect, right?
Yes, because that's the name that will link to the ORCID ID. So that when they register for their ORCID, the name that they put there should be the same name that they will have to put under personal profile. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much. I think this one is also important to look at. The earlier presentation identified that the project will start 1 December 2023, the online form. Yes. So what we are trying to do, colleagues, is to ensure that the funding decision is done during the course of 2023. We want to make sure that we finalize everything and we communicate the successful project in 2023. Now, as you know, colleagues, it takes a little bit of time for actually projects to start, because different funding agencies have different internal processes to actually do the awards to their national researchers, So we are trying to put this cutoff date of 1 December 2023, because we want to make sure that we deal with the awards and everything. But we want to make sure that when it comes January 2024, all projects are in place and all projects can actually start. That's the whole idea why the date of the 1st of December is important, because we know other funders will require a month, you know, to do contracts with our national researchers. Other funders will require 2 months. So it's different processes for different funders. And we must give sufficient time, but we want to ensure that projects are in place by at least the 1st of December so that we know all projects are running by the beginning of 2024. I will leave it at this, colleagues, and I'm very sorry that we can't go through all the details, but there was another, when I was scrolling, when my colleagues were presenting, there was another question that I saw about the national annex for COSTECH for Tanzania, that the link for the national annex for Tanzania is not operational, or it provides an error or something like that. The link that we are provided by COSTECH is the one that you see on the core document, but colleagues from COSTECH have actually indicated to us that they will at some point need to change that link. So we are still waiting for the actual final link of COSTECH. So please, we are aware as the core secretariat that there might be some issues with the link that you see for Tanzania, but we will be receiving, anytime from now, we will be receiving a new link for Tanzania, and we will update that on the core document and re-upload the core document. And for those who are asking, who are asking for the slides of this webinar and the video, as I indicated when we started, this video will be uploaded on the NRF call webpage. The slides will be uploaded on the NRF call page, and we will have a new document where we address all the questions that are raised here in writing, and we will upload that document on the NRF webpage. I hope that this a bit clear to colleagues. I have to release colleagues now and to end this webinar, and I'm sorry that we could not go through all the questions, but we will definitely provide you with answers, and we will upload that on the NRF webpage. So thank you to everybody who attended the webinar, and thank you to also the funders who also attended the webinar. And I would also like to thank all the NRF colleagues who participated today and who provided presentations. Thank you so very much, colleagues, and all the best with your applications.
Sorry, Prudence, one last comment.
Yes.
So if people have not had time to put all the questions that they have, and maybe there are some questions that at the moment they have not thought of, what is the plan for that?
I think the easiest way to deal with it is for colleagues to submit the questions to the SDG pilot call email address, and then we will incorporate those questions and then make sure that they are part of the document that we'll put together. Thank you for raising that, Moses. It's an important point. So if you have a burning question that has not been addressed here, you can still email your question to the SDG pilot call email address, and we'll make sure that we'll deal with that question.
Okay.
Thanks, Nosisa. Is there any last words you want to give, Nkateko, or are you okay from your side?
Thank you, Prudence. I think I see a lot of colleagues mentioning that their institutions are not added on the system.
Yes.
We are going to add those institutions today. If they can maybe check a bit later, they will be able to see the institutions. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Nkateko, for that. And I'm taking it. Was that all, Nkateko?
I think so, Prudence. If there's any other questions that the colleagues have, which are system related, as you've indicated, we are going to respond. I've seen colleagues saying maybe they are unable to add more than one on some of the sections. They're unable to add more than one. I was just quickly looking for the question, but what we'll do, Prudence, is we'll go through all the questions and like you indicated, we are going to respond accordingly.
Okay. Okay. And then Nosisa, are you also okay from your side?
Well, I was just thinking about the fact that although the participants have got the framework document, sometimes the slides and the presentation provide better information. They sort of translate the framework. So I wonder if the slides will be shared on the platform.
Yeah, no, of course. That's what I've been saying, that the slides and the video, this webinar and everything will be shared on the NRF webpage. So everything will be uploaded on the NRF call webpage.
Okay. Sorry, I missed that.
Okay. Okay, I'm sorry, colleagues, but I really have to end this webinar now. And please email us on the SDG pilot call. And I'm so happy to see so many colleagues that have joined the webinar and to see the interest from all the researchers. This is a pilot call, and I am so happy that with the pilot call, we were able to generate so much interest with our research communities. Thank you so very much, colleagues, and we are all available here for you to deal with any questions that you might have. Have a good morning to those who are still in the morning phase, and have a good afternoon to everybody else. Thank you, colleagues.